Evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Sterling Heights City Council to order. Without objection, I would ask that we suspend the rules to provide this council meeting be held via video and teleconference in accordance with Governor Whitmer's Executive Order 2020-75, and that participation of no less than 4 council members on this conference call constitutes a quorum for purposes of conducting this meeting pursuant to the Open Meetings Act. Additionally, comment on tonight's budget introduction will be provided via Zoom teleconference at the following telephone number: 929-205-6099. When prompted, residents should enter the following meeting number: 4411997775 and press pound. You do not need to enter a passcode. As with our prior Zoom video conference meetings, I would ask public comments to remain to any other agenda item or city business be provided via Zoom teleconference during communications from citizens at the same telephone number. Procedurally, in order to facilitate an orderly meeting by video and teleconferencing, I ask that if any of my colleagues want the floor to make or second a motion, please unmute yourself and ask for the floor. This will allow me to identify you. In case 2 council members are speaking over one another, I will make the final call. Also, council members are reminded to please have your devices on mute when not talking to limit interference, and refrain from watching the meeting online due to the slight broadcast delay. Also remember to unmute yourself if you would like the floor. All votes of the city council tonight will be by roll call vote conducted by the city clerk. Is there any objection to proceeding in the manner that I've outlined tonight? Seeing and hearing none, I'll now recite the Pledge of Allegiance on behalf of the City Council so it can be heard clearly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Riska, will you please proceed by reciting the invocation tonight?
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Riska. May we please have the roll call tonight?
Mayor Taylor?
Participating.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Participating.
Mrs. Koski?
Participating.
Mr. Radke?
Participating.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Mrs. Schmidt.
Participating.
Mr. Yanez?
Participating.
Participating.
And Mrs. Yarko?
Participating.
Thank you, Ms. Riska. Council, we need approval of the agenda tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
The motion to approve the agenda has been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by, I'm sorry, with Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Radke?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Yanez?
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko?
Yes.
Mrs. Koski?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. The agenda has been approved. Next item on our agenda tonight is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me begin once again with sharing an update on some of our statistics related to the COVID crisis at hand. If I can draw your attention to the screen. If you, let me see if I can pull this up. Okay. So looking at the top left-hand corner, these are the COVID cases by day. You can see a steady trend downward. Likewise, the COVID deaths by day in Sterling Heights, while a little bit more erratic, you can see still a downward trend. Early on, we were averaging well above 2. Then the average was about 2, and now the average is about 1 a day. Of course, we want to get down to 0. But the trend is headed that way. So relatively good news on the statistics, which again are mirroring what's being reported throughout the county and throughout southeastern Michigan. Unfortunately, as most have heard by now, our 39th Sterling Fest has to be canceled. It was scheduled for July 23rd, 24th, and 25th. This is the first time that we've ever had to cancel Sterling Fest in its history. But due to state and federal health guidelines limiting large gatherings of people, that necessitated the cancellation. So it obviously was not an easy decision, but at the end of the day, safety of all the participants, including vendors and all the volunteers and so on, prevailed over the celebratory event. So we are working hard on the 2021 event. The good news is all the artists have agreed to extend their contracts for the following year. So again, on Thursday of 2021, we'll have Simply Queen. On that Friday, we will have Plain White Tees. And on Saturday, we will have Foreigner and Asia. So look forward to the 2021 Sterling Fest, and we'll somehow get through this 2020 season with some other activities. We have a lot of things planned, but certainly it will be different than a normal summer for sure. And you've probably heard that the governor's stay-at-home order has now been lifted. That came as a surprise yesterday after it was just extended a little over a week ago until June 12th. So in any case now, most city facilities will open on June 10th, which is a week from tomorrow. Employees will be reporting on Monday, June 8th and 9th to get reacclimated to the various setups and in a very restrictive environment with about 25% occupancy. So it'll take a couple of days to work through all the new procedures, including daily health screening, and then we'll be ready to greet the public at our facilities on, again, June 12th. Also, it's important I note that playgrounds are opening this week. We'll have them all open by the end of the week. Of course, we'll have signage up that encourages parents and children to maintain social distancing. Tennis and pickleball courts will be open this week in full. Basketball and sand volleyball, however, will have to wait until phase 5 of the governor's plan, which the governor indicated yesterday that she expects to be into phase 5 by the 4th of July. So that's about a month that we'll have to contend with some more restrictions in some of our recreational activities. Pavilion rentals are expected to begin in mid-July. So look forward to more information in that respect. And let me exit this. And continuing on behalf of Commissioner Joe Romano, I would like to invite the residents of Sterling Heights to attend the virtual Yoga at the Hill event this Saturday, June 6th from 9:30 a.m. until 11 a.m. This event will be live streamed on the Macomb County Board of Commissioners Facebook page and will offer an hour and a half of meditation and all-level yoga. Those who register at yogaatthehill.com will also receive a free t-shirt. This is a wonderful community event, and we want to encourage all county and Sterling Heights residents to attend. This event is normally held at Freedom Hill in person, but obviously due to the circumstances, it's being held virtually this year. So on behalf of Commissioner Romano, we certainly encourage individuals to attend. And I wanted to call attention to a couple of items on the consent agenda this evening. First, there is a resolution declaring June 5th, so this Friday, is National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the city of Sterling Heights. The National Gun Violence Awareness Day movement commenced following the tragic death of a 15-year-old who was shot and killed in Chicago on her way home from school in 2013. So as a result of that, communities across the nation now recognize this important day to bring awareness to gun violence and various means to minimize it. And in light of this day, the halo will be lit orange, which is the official color for the National Gun Violence Awareness Day. So look forward to Friday night, the halo being lit orange. I also wanted to draw attention to, once again, the state of emergency extension, which was declared by the mayor on March 13th. There is a need to extend that further. The resolution does just that and tie bars our local emergency to the duration of the county-wide emergency. So the city council won't have to continue to take this action. We do expect that the county emergency declaration, which expires at the end of the month, will likely be extended into July, but that would then occur automatically. So, Mayor, that concludes my report this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. The next item on our agenda tonight is an ordinance introduction. This is to introduce the fiscal year 2021 appropriations ordinance. We have a presentation from our Finance and Budget Director, Jennifer Varney. Ms. Varney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Kasupski, and City Council. I'm happy to be here via Zoom tonight to present the proposed 2021 budget. Share my screen here. Needless to say, the city is facing challenging times due to the unprecedented public health crisis. The proposed budget reflects anticipated reductions in revenues resulting from the economic downturn and proposes spending cuts and a measured use of general fund balance to make up the shortfall. The total city budget is $213.9 million, which can be broken down into 5 major fund types as depicted here. The largest city fund, the general fund, totals $108.1 million, or 50% of total fund budget, followed by the water and sewer fund at $53.4 million, which is nearly 23% of the total fund budget. Special revenues, capital projects, and debt service funds make up the remainder. In total, the budget decreased 21%, or $55.6 million over last year. The major changes are broken down on this slide. A decrease in the capital projects fund of $28.5 million. $24 million was budgeted for the construction of a new public works building in the prior year. In addition, the sidewalk gap and repair programs have been postponed until next year. Only the most critical capital projects are included in the budget. Departmental requests totaled $11.8 million. $5.9 million of projects, or 50% of requests, were originally to be proposed. However, this was cut an additional $1.3 million to a total of $4.6 million due to the COVID crisis. A decrease in major road construction of $10.1 million is due to the completion of several large projects in the prior year. Although we are anticipating a cut of nearly $2.4 million in road funding from the state over the next 3 years, the city is still able to fund $6.1 million for new projects this year. A decrease of $10 million in the Parks and Recreation Fund is due to the wind down of construction funded through the Recreating Recreation millage. A decrease of $4.2 million in facilities improvements is due to the timing of renovation projects that were funded through a $20 million bond that was issued in 2018. A decrease of $2.3 million in the road bond construction fund is due to a slight delay in the Mound Road project. A decrease of $2 million in the local roads construction. This is just due to timing of projects. Thanks to the renewal of the Safe Streets millage, $5.1 million of neighborhood road reconstruction is funded in the proposed budget. And a decrease of $550,000 in the water and sewer fund is primarily due to grant-funded sewer televising in the prior year. These decreases are partially offset by an increase of $2.6 million in the general fund. The general fund budget totals $108.1 million and makes up over 50% of the total city budget. The general fund can be divided into the city's 8 departmental budgets as depicted here. The total general fund budget increased 2.5% or $2.6 million over last year. The main variances are listed here, starting with last year's budget of $105.5 million, and then adding $2.4 million due to contractual wage increases for employees, $2.1 million due to an increase in the required contribution to the police and fire pension fund, just under $400,000 in increased health insurance costs due to an 8.5% rate increase. This increase was offset by employee co-insurance contributions. Current employees contribute up to 10% of insurance costs depending on union contract. And an increase to the general fund employee pension fund of $200,000. These increases are offset by savings of $925,000 due to a decrease in the contribution to the retiree medical health care plan, savings of $800,000 due to a lower transfer to the capital projects fund, resulting from a reduction of capital expenditures and a use of capital project fund balance, savings of $475,000 in debt service due to the payoff of the debt on the city center commons last year, and a $250,000 decrease in liability insurance due to a one-time reduction in expected claims. And this brings us to this year's total proposed budget of $108.1 million. Many cuts were made over the last 30 days from the budget as it was to originally be proposed. You can see here that the proposed general fund expenses originally totaled $110.3 million. The $2.2 million of expenditures that have been cut from the proposed budget are detailed here. The contribution to the retiree medical fund was reduced by $925,000. The city is still making the total recommended contribution that's calculated by the actuary. All previously proposed personnel additions have been eliminated, including 6 firefighters, 4 fire cadets, and multiple interns and part-time positions. There is no increase in full-time headcount included in the proposed budget. As previously mentioned, the sidewalk gap and repair programs have been postponed for this year, along with the postponement of employee-wide training initiatives such as Lean Six Sigma training and the employee one-day sabbaticals that were introduced last year. And now let's look at general fund revenues. Budgeted general fund revenues total $105.5 million and broken down into the major categories as depicted here. And property taxes still make up most of general fund revenue at 63% of the total. Total general fund revenues decreased by $840,000 or 0.7%. Revenue decreases in state revenue sharing, court fines, building permit revenue, and investment income total over $4 million and are all attributable to the economic impact of the COVID crisis. An increase in the revenue collected from the police and fire millage of $2.2 million offsets these decreases. However, this revenue is used specifically for the contribution to the police and fire pension plan and therefore is not available for other general fund uses. Furthermore, the increase in the police and fire millage was offset by a reduction in the general operating millage rate. So the overall city millage rate remains the same as last year. General operating revenue increased only $850,000 or 2% this year, which is entirely due to the inflationary taxable value increase of 1.9%. Total general fund revenue was reduced by nearly $5 million from what was originally to be proposed in the budget. As you can see from this chart, the city's tax rate continues to be one of the lowest in the county and is 6.3 mils below the average of all cities in Macomb. The proposed general fund expenditures exceed expected general fund revenues by $2.6 million. Reductions in state shared revenue, court fines, building permits, and interest income, as well as a reduction in the general operating tax rate, have reduced this year's expected revenues by nearly $5 million. Over $2.2 million of expenditures have been removed from the budget, leaving a proposed use of fund balance of $2.6 million. The city has worked diligently to build up fund balance since the Great Recession. As of the 2019 audit, the general fund balance was nearly 25% of expenditures. This is what fund balance is for, to help the city weather unexpected financial storms without immediate drastic cuts to residential services. This crisis is unlike any other we have faced, and the truth is there are many unknowns in the future. Strategic use of fund balance over the next few years while continuing to budget for critical needs will ensure continued strong financial position during this unprecedented crisis. As you can see from the chart, despite expected lower revenue in the last few months of the current fiscal year, fund balance is still expected to increase slightly to about 26% of expenditures at year end. The proposed use of fund balance will reduce the overall percentage to 23%. This is still a healthy level and will allow the city time to analyze the changing economic conditions over the next 6 months and bring proposed budget adjustments to City Council in December at the regular budget amendment. Next up is the Water and Sewer Fund. The Water and Sewer Fund budget totals $53.4 million this year, and as you can see from the chart, water purchases, sewage disposal, and our share of Macomb County debt service make up nearly 80% of the costs. The water rates from the Great Lakes Water Authority increased 3% this year. Due to the COVID crisis, the GLWA is delaying their rate increase to October 1st, which will save the ratepayers approximately $220,000. This discount has been passed on to the Sterling Heights ratepayers. Macomb County Public Works has increased their rates to the city 4.8%. This is a reduction of their original proposed increase, which was 5.1%. It includes savings passed on from the GLWA through to Macomb County. The bulk of the Macomb County increase is related to a 26% increase in debt service due to the city's share of new debt issued by the Oakland-Macomb Interceptor District for sewer line rehabilitation. Another variable that significantly influences our water and sewer rates is usage. Nearly 80% of water and sewer costs are fixed. Unfortunately, that means lower usage actually increases the rate per unit we must charge to cover the system's costs. Overall usage on the GLWA system and even nationally has been declining over the last decade, and Sterling Heights is no exception. As illustrated in this chart, the city has seen a decline in usage of nearly 20% over the last decade. In 2011, system usage was over 690 million cubic feet, while in 2019 that dropped to just over 590 million. While there is always variability due to weather conditions, the trend is showing consistently less water usage over time. Based on estimates from the GLWA and consistent with city trends, the current budget assumes a total system usage of 570 million cubic feet for next year. This is a 6.5% drop from the usage that was used to calculate last year's rates. As such, the budget includes a rate increase that will cost the average user an additional $3 per month. Savings passed on by the GLWA, as well as budget cuts by the city, resulted in a reduced increase of nearly 50% from what was originally to be proposed. It is important to understand that although rates are increasing over the last decade, the average user is using less water. Based on recent historical data, we have recalculated the average annual residential usage and found that it is 9,000 cubic feet as opposed to the 12,000 cubic feet that has been used for many years. Based on this new average, the average residential customer is paying $64 a month for their water and sewer services. Only a $3 a month increase over last year's rates, which are depicted here. And as you can see, Sterling Heights still has one of the lowest water and sewer rates of our comparable communities and the lowest rates of Macomb County cities. While there is no disputing that water rates have been increasing over the last decade, lower usage has offset some of the increases. As you can see here, in 2008, the average residential user paid $37 per month for water and sewer services, and in 2021 will pay $64 per month. That equates to an average annual increase of 4.3% over the last 12 years. While that increase is greater than inflation over the same time period, this is not unique to Sterling Heights or even Michigan. In a study published by CBS News in 2019, it was found that nationally, water rates increased by nearly 60% from 2010 to 2019, while other goods increased only 20%. Furthermore, nationally, the average user pays $104 per month for water and sewer services, significantly higher rates than we see here in Michigan. Next, the special revenues funds totaled $33.6 million and include funds for parks and recreation and major and local road construction. Due to gas tax revenue losses over the past few months, revised estimates for Public Act 51 road funding were received from the state of Michigan. A reduction in revenue to the city of nearly $2.4 million is projected over the next 3 fiscal years, including the current year. These reductions have been incorporated into the current year estimates and proposed budget. Despite this loss in funding, the city is still able to complete many projects. The 2020 construction season will see projects with a total cost of $23.6 million. The city cost of these projects totals $13.4 million, of which $6.1 is included in the proposed budget. The resurfacing of Metro Parkway and Saul Road, the continued reconstruction of 19 Mile, and concrete replacement on Pondview are all planned. The local road fund also saw a reduction in funding from the state. However, the renewal of the Safe Streets millage, which was renewed by the voters for an additional 10 years, ensures that local road reconstruction will continue. $5.1 million for neighborhood road repair and reconstruction is included in the proposed budget. The Parks and Recreation Fund totals $10.1 million this year and includes operational expenses for the department, as well as capital and debt service for the park improvements and amenities funded through the Recreating Recreation millage. Nearly $10 million less will be spent this year due to the wind down of the millage funded construction. The capital projects funds total $12.5 million and include the use of proceeds from the facilities renovation bond, road bonds, as well as investments in capital projects, equipment, and vehicles. Some highlights in the proposed budget include the refurbishment of the City Hall exterior finishing system, the repair of the fire training tower, Phase 2 of the Senior Center roof replacement project, refurbishment of the police department lockers, replacement of 19 high mileage police vehicles, a high mileage fire engine that is over 20 years old, and the replacement of the police in-car camera systems, computers, and modems for 1/3 of the police cars as part of a 3-year project. Finally, the debt service funds total $6.3 million and provide funding for the debt payments on outstanding road bonds and bonds for the facilities renovations in the new DPW building. Voter-approved debt on the fire stations is also included here, and that will be paid off in 2024. This was definitely not a normal budget season, and while we were not able to hold the detailed budget workshops that we have in the past, I hope this overview gives City Council and the residents insight into the proposed budget. We also have created a budget video that is currently available on the city website. This video goes into more detail about the proposed budget and includes presentations from each department director. I encourage any residents who would like more information on the budget to view the video, as well as review the 460-page document that is also available on the website. As a reminder, the proposed budget is scheduled for adoption at the next City Council meeting, and I would encourage any City Council members interested in amending the proposed budget to do so this evening. And that includes my overview, and I, as well as all the department directors, are available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Varney. As stated earlier, today we are receiving public comments on this item via telephone conferencing. Those members of the public who are on the line right now that wish to participate on this agenda item will be recognized in turn and asked whether you have a comment at that time. In fact, what I think we're going to do, as we've done in the past, is we're going to open it up to the public by asking any members of the public who are on the line to press *9. So if you wish to participate in this item, press *9, which will notify me that your hand is raised and that you desire to speak. Again, to be clear, this is just for this agenda item. If you want to speak on the introduction of the budget, press *9. If you want to speak on any other item, there'll be another opportunity towards the end of this meeting during communications from citizens. So I'm going to ask one more time, if you want to speak, please press *9. If not, I'm going to close that portion. Okay, I'll close that portion and we will move on to the city council. Council, we need a motion to introduce the budget.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko,
resolve to introduce the appropriations ordinance for the fiscal year 2020-2021. Support.
it's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Zarko?
I first want to thank all of our directors, especially Mrs. Varney, because this budget was almost complete at the time that the COVID-19 virus became an issue. So because of unknown costs that the city will be paying out, because of the emergency, she had to do the budget twice. So we almost had, and I can see by the reductions that we're being very cautious in how we're spending money. So I really don't have any questions. I certainly understand why we're doing some of the things that we're doing now. And I know that at any time during the year, we can amend the budget. And I would think that after we get through this crisis, we will probably have, I would say, longer discussions on moving forward when we do an amendment or half-year amendment in December. So I'm expecting that once we get through the crisis, once we know how much money we're getting from revenue sharing, how much money we're getting from the government to help pay for some of these emergency costs, it'll give us a better idea of how we can go back to the original budget and implement some of the costs, the employees. We'll be able to do that later on in the fiscal year. So I just want to thank everybody for all their input. Certainly, we've been given the opportunity to not only read the budget, the summary, and watch the video that features our directors on each of the different departments. But right now, I'm comfortable with what we're doing moving into the unknown. So thank you again. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarko. Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I would like to echo Mrs. Yarko's sentiments. This budget is significantly less than what it was supposed to be. And I think those of us, all of us were around in 2008, and we kind of went into a mode of trying to save wherever we could because of the unknown, and we don't know what funding is going to come to us. I think this is a really good compromise without knowing what our true funding is going to be throughout the year. I'm very glad that we are still meeting our commitment for our retiree health obligations. I think that's really important that we stay on top of that. We've been very conscientious about making sure that we make those contributions. And I as well would like to thank everyone in administration. All the directors really went and looked at all of their
I believe we're having some technical issues with Mrs. Schmidt. At least we are on my end. Okay. So Mrs. Schmidt, we lost you a little bit there, but it sounded like you were wrapping up. So if we can get you back, we'll have you come back.
I'm sorry, my iPad keeps freezing up. I'm not sure where I left off. I don't have much more to say except thank you very much to all the directors that dug deep into their budgets and eliminated where they could. And hopefully we can get some of that back in by the end of the year. And that retiree health funding to me is really important that we stay on top of that. So I have nothing further until I freeze again. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Council, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? And I just want to reiterate for not just the council, but for the public's sake, all of our directors are on the Zoom conference and available to answer questions if anybody has any. So council, is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Mike,
Mr. Radke.
I have a question. If we want to suggest budget amendments to be created, do we suggest them now or do we suggest them during our time at the end of the meeting?
So I'm pretty sure that the budget amendments should be happening right now during the agenda item.
Okay.
So if you, and there's there's a script that was provided. If you have an addition or a reduction from the budget for a specific purpose, this would be the appropriate time to provide it. And yeah, so now is the appropriate time, Mr. Radke.
Okay, well, sorry, caught me off guard there. So I would like to propose an amendment to the budget to be prepared by the city manager to have the city pay for postage, return mail postage on absentee ballots that are going out this year because of the COVID-19 crisis. So I guess I move to have the city create that budget amendment.
Support.
Am I frozen? Or is Mike frozen now?
Mike is frozen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Taylor, you are frozen.
I guess you're the chair now, Mrs. Sarowski.
Yeah, well, hey, oh, wait. So
He's
can
coming
someone,
soon.
is he come back? I think he bounced off to come back. Let's give him some time to come back in
Sure.
first.
Some technical difficulties here. I am here now. Do you?
Okay.
Was it me that froze that time?
Yes.
Okay. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. Okay, let me before we get back to you, Mr. Radke, let me just confirm that we're still good to go. And if Mr. Rizek wants to let me know otherwise, I'm going to assume that we're good to go and that we're still live. So, okay, Mr. Radke, my apologies.
You're fine.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
I was totally frozen. I did not hear the amendment at all.
Okay. Why don't we have Mr. Radke, because I lost him during the amendment as well. So, Mr. Radke, if you could make the motion again, please.
So I move that the city administration prepare a budget amendment to provide return mail postage on absentee ballots this year for the COVID-19 crisis.
Okay, support. It's been moved and supported. Mr. Radke, any discussion on the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Talking to my colleagues and talking to the citizens of Sterling Heights, I know because of the current crisis, there's a lot of things on people's mind. And the number one thing is we need to make sure we protect the election this year going forward. So in thinking that through, we had several options that were given to us by the city administration. And I came up with this one. And I think it's going to make sure people are able to vote while also keeping social distance, because we don't know if COVID-19 is going to come back. And I want to know that everyone has a right to vote, either through the mail, by absentee ballot if they'd like to. There'll be polling locations open on election day. And there also will be hopefully ballot boxes installed, though I think we still have to make that motion too. But I know that in talking with my colleagues and myself, the number of overriding concern of all the city council is that people have a right to vote, and we want to make sure that they exercise their right safely and hopefully encourage as many people to vote as possible. So that's why I brought forward this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Council, any other discussion on the proposed amendment?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you. So I have to say that at this time, it is very concerning to me to try to figure out how, what the money is that's going to be coming in, what we can do to continue to protect both the residents, our fiduciary responsibility, but also to protect their rights to vote, to make sure that we do not create a burden on them, that we do not prevent anyone who needs to vote from voting. So this, I'm torn between not spending any more additional funds when we don't know even what we're going to have to deal with completely at the moment, and also understanding that we really have an opportunity here to ensure the ability for people to vote at all levels. One thing COVID-19 has taught us, one of many things, but the greatest thing it has taught us is that we absolutely have no control and we do not know what the future holds. So with that, we have to provide a number of contingencies and to have those available to us as when we need them, which means that we would have to make that this amendment now in order to prepare for that. So I am in support of this. I am not, thrilled that we're hoping that it's not. I'm very glad that with the cuts in our budget, with the decreased costs that we have going out right now, I am confident that we can pretty much offset this cost of the absentee ballot, absentee mail-in ballots. If we have the boxes, that would increase that offset with that decrease of cost. It'll make it cheaper. But also, if people and people do need to understand, if you've got return mail postage on something and you bring it in, we're not charged for that. It's only charged at the time that it goes through the postal service. So just having that stamp on there assures that anyone that needs to vote that cannot get out for whatever reason can still vote. That's why I'm in favor of it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Zarowski. Council, anyone else on, we'll take this amendment first, and then we can go back to the main motion, which is the budget. Council, anyone else?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. I am not in favor of this amendment. I think at this time, yes, I think everyone should have the right and the means to vote. And I have to say, in my 18.
I believe she's frozen again, Mr. Mayor.
Right. I would hope that everybody would be off their internet tonight and be out enjoying the.
And I froze.
Mrs. Schmidt.
You know what? I will leave the meeting and come back.
Okay. We'll see you in a minute. While we wait for Mrs. Schmidt, Council, Mrs. Koski.
If I could go first before she comes back, through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool or to whoever can answer this, maybe Ms. Reska. For whatever reason, I thought that the boxes were already being put up at the fire stations. I thought we were going to put up 4 boxes to accept the absentee ballots. I'm assuming that's what we were talking about in regard to the ballots, but also the return postage. I thought that was not that expensive, and money was already available to do that. My misunderstanding, apparently. Can you tell me how much money we have to budget for this return postage and for the cost of the boxes if they're not already set up?
Why don't we have Ms. Riska answer the first one, and I'm sure Mr. Vanderpool could take a shot at the second one regarding the boxes. So Ms. Riska, can you opine as to the cost associated, or maybe Ms. Varney, if you know, but I'll start with you, Ms. Riska, the cost for the return postage.
Sure. So the cost for return postage on ballots is 71 cents per ballot. Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski is correct. Ballots, we only pay that postage if ballots are returned via mail. We don't pay for that postage if they put them in our drop boxes. So it is 71 cents per ballot. I can't actually answer the Dropbox question as well. We have already placed our order for the 4 drop boxes at the 4 fire stations, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The cost was less than $10,000. So we did not have to bring that back to council, but those are in process right now. And we hope to have them in place by July 1st is our goal at the moment.
So are you saying that we don't have to do a budget amendment that's already taken care of? It's less than $10,000. So it was a project that Mr. Vanderpool could move forward with?
Yes, that is correct. We have already started on that project for the drop boxes.
So as far as the postage is concerned, we won't know that until it actually happens. We only pay for what is returned by mail, according to the bulk stamp.
Yes, that is correct. But we would want to, we would need to budget for it. And if I could also say our envelopes for August, just as a point of reference, our envelopes for August have been purchased or have been ordered already. I believe they've already been printed.
You're gonna have to
so-
excuse me. My husband's in the hospital and this hospital call. Hello?
Okay, we're gonna have Ms. Koski go on mute and hoping for the best for Dennis. Ms. Schmidt, are you back in the meeting now? Not hearing from Ms. Schmidt. If I could finish, well, let me do this. I
Mayor
think I can,
Taylor?
Yes, Mrs. Zarko.
Do you think maybe we should take a 5-minute recess of the meeting? All of us get out and then all of us come back in. Do you think that would help with Mr. Dion could help us with that?
I don't. I think Mrs. Schmidt, the problem with Ms. Schmidt is when she came back into the meeting, she wasn't a co-host. I don't want to cause more trouble. I think we're back, and I think Mrs.
Okay.
Schmidt is back in the meeting. Ms. Schmidt, I'm going to give you the floor, but before we do that, can I go back to the question from Mrs. Koski? She was asking, I'd like to finish that thought. The question of the fact that the ballots have already been printed, and how is that, Ms. Riska, how will that impact this amendment, or will it?
The envelopes have, so we've already placed the order with our vendor. It's likely that those have already been printed. That would be, we would not, if we are doing a return postage, we would have to reorder new envelopes. So that is a cost, and that cost would actually have to come out of this fiscal year because I need them before July 1st.
Okay, can you estimate how much the cost to reprint the envelopes would be, or reorder, what the lost expense there would be?
We ordered 30,000, so it would be, it's about $3,300 or about 11 cents a piece. So we would,
Okay.
ultimately, we would pay for it twice, so it'd be about 6,600.
Okay.
May I amend my motion, Mr. Taylor, or my Mayor Taylor, excuse me? Or may I withdraw and remake it?
Well, if you're looking to withdraw the motion, then there really isn't any reason to have any further
I
discussion on it. So hold on, let me just finish my thought. Mr. Koszubski, would it be appropriate for us to allow Mr. Radke to withdraw his motion so he can make a new motion, or to continue debate on this motion until every council member's had a chance to opine?
He has the opportunity to withdraw his motion as long as, and at any time, so he can do that. And he can make a new motion if you'd like. It would end the discussion on this point.
Okay.
I guess what I'm
allowing-
curious about is, should I just make the motion for November then? I don't want to force us to have to reprint absentee ballots for August since we're so close to the deadline.
Ms. Riska, would that make a difference?
Yes, it absolutely would. That would allow us to move forward with August as we have planned already, and then that would not be a problem for November.
Okay. Mr. Radke, I'll give you the floor to
Yes,
withdraw your motion if you,
I'd like to withdraw my motion and make a new motion if that's possible, Mr. Mayor.
okay. You have the floor, Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we pay return postage only on ballots in the November election, absentee ballot in the November election. I move.
Okay, motion to increase the budget to allow for return postage paid on absentee ballots for the November 2020 general election's been moved, and I support it. Mr. Radke, you've had a chance to give discussion on this already. Do you need any additional or further
No.
discussion?
I just didn't want to cost the city $6,000 unnecessarily. I did not know the ballot envelopes had already been printed, so I made a new motion.
Okay, Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. I'm going to try and stick with you this time. I am not in favor of this motion at this time. I think we're trying to cut budget instead of increase our budget. And in all the 18 years I've been on council, I have never had one resident say, I did not vote or I was unable to vote because I could not put postage on my absentee ballot. And especially since we're giving other avenues for them to return those ballots, I'm comfortable with having them at the fire station and at City Hall and not incurring this additional expense. I understand the COVID fear, and the concern is there for me as well. We still have to give people the opportunity to vote at the polls, which we're doing. Like I said, there's not a compelling reason for me to pay for this at this time, especially when funds are of the unknown right now. So I will be not be voting in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Council, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this? Mrs. Zarko?
Hi, yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor. At this time, I would not be in favor of amending the budget. However, I would be open to bringing this back after the primary election if we see that we have a problem. In other words, as soon as that election was over and before we printed the November ballots, I would be open to listening to this if we have a problem. But right now, it sounds like we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. So that's why, and the other reason I'd like to wait is I know that the state is investigating paying for a return. So I would rather they paid for it rather than we pay for it. Certainly, if they're going to cut our revenue sharing, I would like to get some benefits from the state. But at this time, because we can amend the budget at any time we want to. And if Mr. Radke wants to bring this up, say, immediately after the primary in August, I don't have a problem with that. And if we see we have problems with returns, but I'm looking at this absentee ballot situation as if it was a recycling. I have a recycling bin and I recycle in my bin. Okay, there are other people that go to the recycling center and some don't recycle at all. And it's the same thing with voting. You have some people that vote by absentee. You have some people that go to the polls. Some people don't vote at all. So I wouldn't want us to have some type of ordinance that we had mandatory recycling, put it in the budget that we were paying for this, and then people not using that service. So, and that's what I see here. And I really think that I've never had a complaint for 71 cents. I really don't. And I guess through the chair to Mrs. Riska, if you could tell me, like, how many ballots, like in the last election, did we send out? How many were returned? And how many complaints did you have about returning with postage?
Mrs. Riska?
Sure. So at the March presidential primary, we sent out 11,800 ballots. We received back just over 11,000 ballots. And with regard to who called and inquired about postage on those, I did not receive any calls on it.
Okay. Thank you. But I think right now, if Mr. Radke could hold off on the amendment until after the primary to see if we have a legitimate problem with people not having the opportunity to vote, I would listen to this again. But right now, I don't think, like I said, we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, with the numbers that do come back to us. And I think another thing is if we could also research how many communities throughout the state are going to be paying for their residents to return an absentee ballot, might be a good thing to lobby for the state that the state pays for it. And I'm sure, Mr. Radke, people in Lansing, that this would be a great opportunity. Our Secretary of State says this was a great idea, and maybe if you know her well enough, you can encourage her to do this throughout the state so that everybody has the same opportunity to return that absentee ballot. So nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarko. Anyone else? Council, Mr. Yanez?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, through the chair to our attorney, Mr. Kuchewski. I just want to be clear. The original motion did not say November 2020. The mayor in his second added the year. If the year is not added in the original motion, can that be construed as every November? Do we have to have the year in the motion?
Mr. Koszywski.
I think you could have Mr. Radke clarify his motion. I think he was talking about this year's, but that would be a clarification we need to get from Mr. Radke.
Yes, I was making the motion for this year's election only. I'd like to see how it goes and to evaluate it before we make it an every year program.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to Ms. Riska, how many absentee ballots do you anticipate sending out for the presidential election of November 2020?
Ms. Riska.
It's really difficult to say at this time because of COVID. I know our AVs are going to increase quite a bit. I would say for August, I can start with that number. I think we're probably going to be around 25,000 at the rate that we're going. We've already received back about 4,000 to 5,000 applications. I have staff that's working on that right now. I would expect that would be at least double of that 25,000 for November. So it would probably be between 40 to 50,000 is my guesstimate.
Okay. So if it was 50,000 at 71 cents each, that's 35,500. The other clarification I'd like in the motion is that there's no amount tied to the motion. And I think we really need to amend the motion to have a financial amount tied to it instead of just leaving it open-ended. I want someone to answer that for me if we need to or not.
Mr. Koszywski, with this being kind of up in the air and you know, a number of two variables here, one is known, the other is unknown. How do we proceed? Do we need to have the amount? Ms. Varney, do you need an amount in this? Who feels comfortable answering?
I mean, I have to budget an amount, so I would just, I would suggest we estimate on the high side. That way we have enough to cover. So, you know, 50,000 go out again, even if you offer the postage, some certain percentage, I'm sure is going to use a drop box. So I would want to estimate, you know, at least maybe 30,000 of those will be coming back. So we're talking, you know, 20, I'd probably say 25,000 at least to be safe. And then, you know, I have to budget something, and it's better to budget more than less. And obviously, you know, it's the kind of expense that we won't spend it if people don't return them. But I think maybe $25,000 is a good starting place for the one election, which would cover about 30,000 return ballots.
Mr. Yanez?
So, Mr. Mayor, from what I'm hearing is the motion does not have to have a dollar amount fixed to it. The city will just go ahead and make arrangements to set aside some amount of money to cover the cost of this. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's what Ms. Varney's saying. I think what Ms. Varney's saying is that we have to affix a number to this. We have to budget it. There has to be, as part of our budget document, a line item amount that's attributed to this. Now, if it turns out that the cost ends up being, let's say we pick 25,000, if the cost ends up being 50,000, probably won't. Let's say it's 30,000. Then we'll just have a budget amendment later when that actual spending happens, amend the budget, and it goes back and it goes up. If we don't spend that amount, then it'll be budgeted down, and that would come back. We'd have that in December at the budget amendment in December. Is that right, Ms. Varney?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously it's the kind of expense that we're going to spend, you know, if it's approved. So, you know, I do cleanup budgets amendments in December and June. So, you know, the dollar amount would get cleaned up and approved by council at one of those times. We definitely can bring it in December since we'll know the amount then.
Okay,
So, Mr. Mayor, then
Mr.
can I offer a
ahead,
friendly amendment to the amendment?
you have the floor, Mr. Yanis.
I would like to offer a friendly amendment to the motioner to include $25,000 into his motion.
I accept the friendly amendment.
Okay, Mr. Koszybski, is there any support needed or any other formal action needed for this friendly amendment?
Normally, I would say, let's start over and make the amendment to keep it clear for Ms. Riska. At this point, we have a question on the year as well as the number. If Mr. Radke would withdraw the motion and make the motion with the November 2020 year with the $25,000 budget amendment, then that would clean the record up.
I'm willing to
Mr.
do that.
Radke.
I withdraw my previous motion. I move that we pay for absentee ballot return the November 2020 election and set aside $25,000 to pay for it.
Support. It's been moved and supported. We've had good discussion on this from Mr. Radke and a few others already. I don't think we need to duplicate that. Mr. Yen, is anything else on this?
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just my thoughts on this. I appreciate the input from my colleagues who are opposed to this amendment. I've had conversation with them, and I feel that their concerns are definitely heartfelt. I feel quite differently. You know, the voting is the most basic function of our democracy. This is not recycling. This is not a Parks and Recs program. It's nothing that we pay for on the side. This is the function of our democracy. We just had Memorial Day. The reason why men and women went overseas and died for America is so we have the right to vote, period. Now, I do not have a crystal ball. I have no idea what November is going to look like. I have no idea if COVID is coming back. I have no idea if the state's going to get shut down again. This is worst case scenario planning, period. Now, hopefully it doesn't come back. Hopefully we run things as normal. People get to go to the polls. Those who want to submit absentee ballots can do so. We're going to have 5 drop boxes that people can use. I personally do not put my ballot through the mail. I use an absentee ballot, but I take it directly to the clerk's office because I want to know the clerk received my ballot. So I don't anticipate 100% participation through the U.S. mail. So this is a one-time and one-time only. I think sometimes too in these discussions, I get a little frustrated because worst case scenario seems to be a moving target. Depends what we're talking about. And in this particular case, it's not as important as other things. I too want to make sure that we have a fiscally sound budget, that the city is on good fiscal footing as we go forward, because we don't know what the future holds. But if all else fails, if everything goes to heck, you know, and all functions shut down, the one function we're going to carry on with is the function of democracy. And that means people running for office and people voting. And we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote and that their vote counts. Republican, Democrat, Independent, don't care. Everybody gets the right and opportunity to vote. That's all we're trying to do with this amendment, is make sure that people get to make sure that the function of democracy happens. And so I fully support this one-time amendment to pay for return absentee ballots. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Koski, do you want the floor again to resume your comments?
Please, I apologize for having to leave the meeting, but it was a very important conversation. Question to Ms. Varney. The $25,000, is that considered paying for return postage if it's used, printing of the return envelope? What does the $25,000 get applied to?
The printing of the envelopes would already have been included in the budget, so this would just be an addition. So again, it's an estimate based on Ms. Riska's saying that we may be getting 50,000 for the presidential. If we assume, about 30,000 of those will get returned via mail, again, assuming some people are still going to use a drop box at 71 cents each, that comes out to about 21,000. I bumped it up a little bit and said, let's go with 25. So it's an estimate. I think it's a conservative estimate, a conservative estimate on how much return postage that we might expend for the November election only.
Okay, where are you getting the money from? General fund budget?
It would increase the use of fund balance. So,
Fund balance, right,
yeah,
that's-
it would, right.
So whatever you don't, or we don't use in November, you can just put it back in December, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of expense that if people don't use it, it just won't get spent.
And
When I come
there's-
in December with the amendment, I
Yeah.
can definitely update council on how much we exactly spent, and we can adjust the budget either up or down depending on actual spending for this postage.
Well, no, all you're gonna get is 25,000. If there's less that you spend, then you just give it back. You don't get more.
No, but if more than 30,000 people send it back, I can't stop that.
No,
So
I'm just backing on you. All right, okay, thank you.
Mayor
All
Taylor,
right. Thank you, Mrs. Koski. Mrs. Schmidt,
you know what? I just have one comment. I really take exception with Mr. Yanez implying that I don't take the function of democracy seriously. I really take exception with that because, my vote is my word, and that's all I'm going to say.
okay. Thank you, Mrs.
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor
Mrs.
Schmidt?
Schmidt. Hold on one second, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Zarko, do you have any last
Yes,
comment?
Mayor. The only thing, yes, and I really did take exception to what Mr. Yanis said, is whether we pay 71 cents for somebody to return a ballot or not, we are never denying anybody the right to vote. And I know what my voting record's like. I know what I've instilled in my daughter. I know how my husband. Voting is very, very important. And there is no price tag attached to it. But as I still say, without complaint, to still do this, as like I said, we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And I take offense with the fact that I don't take voting seriously. So nothing further.
Okay, Mr. Radke,
yeah, I just wanted to add one quick point. On the study I sent to Mr. Vanderpool that I hope he will send on to the city council, they did a study of Colorado, which is a totally vote by mail state. And in Colorado, 55% of all ballots were returned through the drop boxes that they install in the cities. So I fully expect that half of the ballots or more will be returned by the drop boxes instead of being mailed back. That's all I wanted to add, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. All right, we've had quite a discussion on this. As Mayor Nadi would say, well, we've had a good discussion, let's vote. And but I'll give my feelings as well. Look, I appreciate the passion that Mr. Yanez showed about a fundamental right in our American democracy. And no, I didn't take his comments to mean that anybody who was necessarily opposed to this is opposed to that tenet of our American democracy. I think Mrs. Schmidt and Mrs. Zarko gave very good reasons for the reason they're going to vote the way they're going to vote. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I can also say that, in my 10 plus years of being on the city council, I've never once heard somebody come to me and say, I would love to be able to vote, but I just can't afford the 71 cents of postage that it costs to return an envelope. So and of course, right now with the COVID-19 pandemic and our budget really in flux, this is more than ever, well, I should say more than any time in the last 10 years, we really have to be mindful of how we're spending our money. This is a close call for me, and I'm going to fall on the side of supporting this motion, voting in favor of it. because I think it is temporary. I think that it gives us the ability to look at where we are after this fall and potentially discontinue doing this. But I also think that with the drop boxes, the cost of postage should be lower. I know a lot of people out there, there's been a lot of misinformation about the security of mail-in voting. And that disinformation, I think, is really a disservice to our country and our democracy. Mail-in voting is secure. It's as secure as you could possibly hope it to be. And I'm not aware of any instances of fraud relating to mail-in voting. But if residents feel like they want to place that ballot into a receptacle owned by the city on city-owned property, then they have the right to do that. And I'm glad that we're giving them that ability to do it. I think that's going to cut down on a lot of the return ballots. But what I think, the reason I think I'm going for this is, with all of what's being said about voting and seeing people standing in lines and people being afraid, some people just still being afraid, and I understand it. I agree with it in a large respect. And I also want to do everything that we can to encourage the people who want to vote by mail to vote by mail. Now, maybe it's easy to say nobody's going to vote by mail now that wouldn't have, just because of the 71 cents. But you know what? Maybe there'll be a news story about it. Maybe other cities will do something like this, and maybe it'll start a little bit of a movement, and maybe it will generate more people voting by mail than voting at the polls. And I want to encourage that, because a lot of our poll workers are people at a critical age and with comorbidities, elderly. So as many people that we can discourage from going to the polls as possible, but still have them vote, I think is a good thing. So I can understand the reason given, and I think it was a close call for me. But I'm just gonna side on doing more to make sure that we're doing everything possible to promote voting and making it as easy as possible for everybody. So with that, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote on the motion to amend the budget by $25,000 to provide for return postage paid on absentee ballots for the November 2020 general election?
Yes. Mrs. Schmidt,
No.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
No.
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke.
Yes.
The amendment passes 5-2. We are still on the main motion, which is to introduce the appropriations ordinance for the fiscal year 2020, 2021. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the budget at
Mr.
this
Mayor?
time? Mr. Radke.
Yes, I just wanted to make a few more comments. I was thoroughly impressed by the job that Mr. Vanderpool and Ms. Varney did with this budget, to take a budget that was pretty much done and then strip out $5 million basically because we believe the state is going to cut revenue sharing to our city. I thought it was a fantastic job in such a short period of time. The one thing that I would say was kind of surprising and saddening to me, but I can totally understand why, was the postponement of the sidewalk gap and sidewalk completion program. Now, I know we discussed this in strategic planning, and I've had residents come up to me on the street and ask me, when are we going to get those sidewalks completed? When are we going to fill those gaps? And I'm sorry to say that it's postponed to next year, but I'm not giving up on it. I don't think the city council is going to give up on it either. That was really our strategic planning this year, and that was really what we wanted to get done. It just saddens me that we had to cut it, but I totally understand why. With COVID-19, the extra cost the city has incurred on top of what we project to be severe revenue sharing cuts from the state, it didn't make sense to spend money that we'd have to backfill someplace else. So I understand the postponement, but I want to say I'm coming back next year for those sidewalks, and hopefully some trees. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Sarowski?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor. And I also too wanted to echo my appreciation for the directors, for Ms. Varney, Mr. Vanderpool, everybody in the city that has really reworked this budget. And Ms. Varney, through the chair to Ms. Varney, it was 55 million, not 5 million that we cut, correct? How much did we cut from that? How much did we cut from the original budget?
So we cut about 5 mil, it was 5 million in revenue. Yeah.
I moved the decimal the wrong way. I was very optimistic, sorry. But with that, I do want to say that even if it was 500,000, it's still a lot of money. 5 million is quite a bit of money that we have not at our disposal, but at least we have made it a little bit easier on us to weather this storm. And I do appreciate everything that you guys have done for all the department heads, especially those in the police and fire who have had to really look at what constitutes not necessary. I thank you all. So again, good job.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sarowski. While it is a $5 million reduction, the budget is $50 million less than last year. Isn't that correct, Ms. Varney?
That's what I meant.
That's
Yeah,
what I
sorry,
thought.
the total fund budget is 50 million less than last year. That's where the 55 came from, correct?
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Koski or Mr. Yanez, any comments on the budget?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Yanez.
I too want to thank everybody who worked so hard on this budget. I know it's a real grind, and especially they had to go back through it a second time. I am disappointed, but completely understand that we cannot hire our 6 firefighters that we so badly need at this time. And I certainly hope that we have the opportunity to take a look at that again, those hires again, as we go through the year and revisit our budget. But outside of that, the city has done a great job managing this and getting us through this difficult time. And I really appreciate everything everybody's done.
Thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Koski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to also congratulate Ms. Varney and her team. You did a fantastic job. And I guess you've had some practice over the last 10 years about cutting. Hopefully everything will improve and we'll be able to get our 6 firefighters come December and anything else that we might need for the public safety programs. So I'm looking forward to a better year next year. And you did a fine job this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Koski, and we hope your husband is doing well. Ms. Varney, thank you very much for your presentation tonight and for working with council over the past couple of weeks. And we thank you for your diligence in preparing what's been probably the most unique budget season of any that we've ever had here in the city of Sterling Heights. I just want to say a lot is expected of our city department of our city officials, our not just the mayor and the council, the city manager, city attorney, really everybody. And this has been really a display of professionalism and class that I think has set an example for this county and for the state of Michigan. So I appreciate every one of you that is on this call. And, I thank you for being here, even though we didn't have a whole lot of questions and comments for you tonight. To the viewing public out there, just know that the city council has been meeting, I shouldn't say meeting, the city council has been receiving updates from city department directors, from city administration regularly, 5 days a week, some days 6 and 7 days a week, for the past almost 3 months. And these directors and department heads and their employees have been doing an incredible job to not only keep their departments running, but to provide us with the information so that we can keep all of the residents out there informed and have all of their questions answered. So I want to take this time to recognize all of you and the work that you've been doing. We sincerely appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. Whether it's, showing up to work every day, protecting our safety, putting your lives on the line with COVID patients and our police and fire department, or making sure you're there for whatever services the residents need. What we're introducing today is a budget that that substantially saves every service that the city residents rely on day to day and what businesses rely on. And while there are difficult cuts and there are things that we were going to add this year that had to be scaled back, this represents a budget that I think the city residents can be proud of. I know I certainly am proud of it. And a lot of credit is due to you, Ms. Varney, Mr. Vanderpool, your team. So we thank you for it. And with that, I don't have any questions. I want to thank my colleagues for the discussion tonight. So without any further discussion, I would ask Ms. Riska for a roll call vote on the motion to introduce the appropriations ordinance.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
before we, okay, we
I'm
are
sorry.
only, yes,
As amended.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
the question I have is, are we only voting today on the introduction of the ordinance and not the amendment? Because that will happen next week, correct? The amendment will be included next week?
No, we're voting on the introduction of the appropriations ordinance as amended.
Can I vote no on my motion? Since I made the motion to introduce, can I vote no on it?
Mr. Koszubski.
It's been amended. So yes, you can.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote on the motion to introduce the appropriations ordinance as amended?
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanas,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
No,
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes,
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schmidt.
No.
Motion carries 5-2. Okay. Bear with me for a moment while I pull up the next item. Next item on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda. Council, do we need a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Kosky.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
support the motion.
It's been moved and supported. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanas,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes,
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sarowski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next item on our agenda tonight is to consider nominations of City of Sterling Heights boards and commissions. Without objection, I'd like to, and to avoid duplication, I'd like to allow nominations to the same board or commission with the same term ending to be taken together if someone objects to a particular nomination. Also, to the extent that we do not have a nomination to any board or commission, I will simply pass on the nomination and ask that we entertain one motion to postpone all of the nominations at the end. So to be clear, if there's an opening on any of these boards and we don't have a nomination for it tonight, we will, I'll ask for a motion to postpone all vacancies to the first meeting in July. And I don't have that in front of me right now, but bear with me. That would be the July 2nd council meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Koszubski?
Isn't,
Maybe
I
you
think
don't
it's
have it.
July 7th.
Oh, yes, July 7th. Sorry, July 7th. So that's without objection. That's how we will go. Okay. So we have on this agenda item, we have up first is the Planning Commission. This Planning Commission is a mayoral appointment There are 3 vacancies and all 3 members are requesting a reappointment. Lori Doty, Nathan Inks, and Edward Kopp, all to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Is there a council member that would make that motion for me?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Sarowski.
Sorry, Mr. Ricky. Resolved to nominate Lori Doughty, Nathan Inks, and Edward Kopp for consideration as an appointee to the Planning Commission at the June 16th, 2020 regular council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
No, I do know them all, and they've done a fine job. I think that they would like to see them continue on the board. So I'm very, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sarowski. Council, is there any further discussion? With no further discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
and Mayor Taylor.
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Board of Code Appeals. This is a city council appointment. There is a member seeking reappointment, Thomas Zetkowski, to a term ending June 30th, 2025. Council, is there a motion or a nomination?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to nominate Thomas Zadkowski for consideration as an appointee to the Board of Code Appeals at the June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
and Mr. Yanez.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Board of Ordinance Appeals 1, vacancy, member seeking reappointment. This is Michael Stickney, City Council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2022. Council, is there someone who'd like to make a motion?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Schmidt.
resolved to nominate Michael Stickney for consideration as an appointee to the Board of Ordinance Appeals 1 at June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
and Mrs. Yarko.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Cat jumped on my table. Sorry. Next up is the Board of Ordinance Appeals 2. There are 3 vacancies. This is a city council appointment. There are 3 separate dates of the term ending dates. So why don't we take the first, which is Roman Stoyalowski, to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Mr. Stoyalowski is seeking reappointment. Is there anyone who'd like to make that motion?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
resolved to nominate Roman Stoyalowski for consideration as an appointee to the Board of Ordinance Appeals 2 at the June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, council? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Mrs. Sarowski, please unmute.
Sorry.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
and Mrs. Kosky.
yes,
Motion carries 7-0. There are 2 open seats on the Board of Ordinance Appeals 2 to terms ending in 2021 and 2022. Is there anyone who has an appointment or a nomination for either of those openings?
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor,
I think that was Mr. Radke first. So I'm going
Yes,
to go
sir.
to Mr. Radke.
Resolved to nominate Steve Weekai for consideration as an appointee to the Board of Ordinance Appeals 2 at the June 16, 2020 regular city council meeting to a term ending in 2021.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any discussion, council?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've talked with Steve quite often. He's expressed an interest in wanting to get involved in the city. I think that this board is a perfect example of how someone can come into city government and learn about the system and also really help keep our neighborhoods clean. So I think he'd be a perfect appointee to it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Council, anyone else?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko?
resolve to nominate Ben.
Hold on.
Pardon me?
Hold on, Ms. Zarko. We need to take these one at a time because there's different term ending dates. So we need to vote on Steve Ukai first before we can go to the next one.
Okay,
So
sorry.
is there any, no problem. Is there any further discussion on this nomination? If not, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
yes,
and Mr. Radke.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Mrs. Zarko?
Yes. Resolve to nominate Ben Ancona for consideration to an appointee to the Board of Ordinance Appeals 2 at the June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, council?
Does the term end in 2022? Just so we can.
Mr. Radke asked for clarification to it. So I believe,
It does.
Yes.
so I believe the term ends in 2022. Did you make the motion, Mr. Radke, for the term ending in 2021 for Mr. Ukai?
I did.
Okay, so this one's 2022. Okay, any further discussion, council? With no further discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
yes,
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. The next board is the Board of Review. 2 members seeking reappointment, John Fenn and Raymond Nadolski. This is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Council, do we have someone who can make both motions at the same time?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to nominate John Fenn and Raymond Nadolski for consideration as an appointee to the Board of Review at the June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, council? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes,
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sarowski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next is the pension board for the police and fire. This is a seat that is the member is seeking reappointment, John Lamorato. This is a term ending on June 30th, 2022, and the appointment is made by the city council. Council, is there somebody who'd like to make that motion?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Schmidt?
Resolved to nominate John Lamarato for consideration to the Police and Fire Pension Board at the June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, council?
Mayor Taylor, just as a point of clarification, I believe you said the term ended in 2022 and our sheet says 2024.
Two.
I get two. I
Okay,
have two.
It says 2022.
Mine says 2024.
Yeah, so as a matter of clarification, the e-packet that was loaded online on the city's website says June 30th, 2024. The memo that was prepared and sent to the city council via email this afternoon says 2022. Ms. Riska, are you able to clarify that for us, Ms. Riska?
I'm trying to look right now. I'll have to make that clarification. At this point, when we do make nominations, it's not necessary to make the term ending date. I will make sure that that is clarified whether or not it's 2022 or 2024. I do not have that at my fingertips at the moment. I apologize for the error.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think we're good for tonight, and then we'll have that clarified at the next city council meeting. So council, is there any other discussion on this item? If not, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
and Mayor Taylor.
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are two appointments tonight, two nominations tonight. One is Devin Koski, who is seeking reappointment. This is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Is there a council member who'd like to make this nomination?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolved to nominate Devin Koski for consideration as an appointee to the Zoning Board of Appeals at the June 16th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
just for clarification, doesn't it need to be in the best interest of the city, or am I
Not
incorrect?
for the nomination.
Not
It
the
would be
nomination.
for the appointment.
Okay, then I have nothing.
Council, any further discussion? If no further discussion, all in favor, Melanie Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
No.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. There is another appointment, a nomination to the zoning board of appeals to a vacancy that's ending June 30th, 2020, to a term that's ending June 30th, 2023. City council's appointment. Is there a city council member who'd like to make that nomination? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to, well, why don't we do this? Why, since it's only this one, why don't we, I'd entertain a motion to postpone this nomination to the June 20th, 2020 city council meeting.
So moved.
Support, either which way.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
and Mrs. Yarko.
Yes.
Mayor,
Yeah, I said the wrong date.
You did.
Right.
For clarification purposes, you meant the June 16th date, correct?
June 16th, yeah, not June 20th, June 16th, 2020. And I don't
Thank you.
think we'll need to redo that, hopefully. Okay. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is a consideration of nominations to boards and commissions. And this item has a number of boards and commissions. We're going to start with the Corridor Improvement Authority. This is a mayoral appointment to there are two appointments. One member is seeking reappointment, Philip Hunsberger, to a term ending June 30th, 2024. Is there a council member who would please make the nomination for me or the appointment for me of Philip Hunsberger to the Corridor Improvement Authority?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead,
Mrs.
Ms.
Koski.
at the mayor's request, move to appoint Philip Hunsberger to the Corridor Improvement Authority to a term ending June 30th, 2024, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor, or sorry, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
and Mrs. Koski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. There is an open seat on the Corridor Improvement Authority, and I'm going to pass on this so that it can be postponed to the next city council meeting or the one after that. So I'm going to pass on the Corridor Improvement Authority opening for now. Move on to the Economic Development Corporation Brownfield Authority. This is a board that has two members seeking reappointment, Cynthia Orchard and Paul Palmieri. This is a mayoral appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2026. Council, is there anyone who would make the appointment for these two individuals?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
at the request of the mayor, move to appoint Cynthia Orchard and Paul Mary to the Economic Development Corporation Brownfield Authority to a term ending June 30th, 2026, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
and Mr. Radke.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Elected Officials Compensation Commission. Two openings, one member is seeking reappointment. Wayne Davis is seeking reappointment. This is a mayoral appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2027. Council, can we have a motion to appoint Mr. Davis?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
at the request of the mayor, resolve to appoint Wayne Davis to the Elected Officials Compensation Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2027, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter subsection 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. The next is an open appointment to the Elected Officials Compensation Commission. And I'm going to ask for a postponement here, but not to the next city council meeting. What I'd like on this one is a postponement to the September 1st, 2020 city council meeting. That gives all of June, July, and August for this item to come back. And the reason I'm doing that, or the reason I'm going to request that, is because I am going to be bringing up and requesting a change to our ordinance over the Planning Commission. As it stands right now, Planning Commission members are not able to serve on more than one board or commission. That's an antiquated ordinance, in my opinion, and it's no longer necessary under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. So I would like to see that ordinance changed to allow for members of the Planning Commission to serve in dual roles. There's another board this evening that has nominations or has an opening, and a Planning Commission member has expressed interest in that. So I'd like to, I would entertain a motion to postpone the vacancy, the appointment to the vacancy on the Elected Officials Compensation Commission to the September 1st, 2020 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Support. It's been moved and supported with no discussion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Yes.
Thank you, Council. Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Ethnic Community Committee. This is a board with 3 members who are seeking reappointment: Sharon Allen, Mohammed Alamari, and William DeChavez, to terms ending June 30th, 2023. This is a mayoral appointment, so Council, I'd appreciate council member who would make the appointment for all 3 on my behalf.
Mayor
Mayor-
Taylor.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you. Resolved at the request of the mayor to appoint Sharon Allen, Mohammed Alamari, and William DeChavez to the Ethnic Community Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2020, subject to the appointees meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter subset 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
I'm going to support and ask for clarification, Ms. Sarowski. I believe you said the term ending June 30th, 2020.
I said, I apologize if I did. I did mean June 30th, 2023.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any discussion, council? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
and Mayor Taylor.
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Local Development Finance Authority. There are 6 members, 5 members seeking reappointment and 1 opening. These are all to a term ending June 30th, 2024, and this is a mayoral appointment. Council, is there somebody who would make a motion to reappoint David Corba, Philip Hunsberger, Stephen Palmaville, Howard Sizemore II, and Jill Tommen to the Local Development Finance Authority?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
at the mayor's request, move to appoint David Corba, Philip Hunsberger, Steve Palmaville, Howard Sizemore II, and Joe Toming to the Local Development Finance Authority to a term ending June 30th, 2024, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, council? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying, gosh, Ms. Riska, go ahead. These are hard. This is the hardest meeting every year to get through.
Oh, I know.
Riska.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
and Mr. Yanez.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. There is 1 opening on the LDFA, and I will pass on that, and we will come back to it. The next is the Arts Commission. There are 2 openings here, 2 members seeking reappointment. Mr. Koszybski, are we taking these one at a time?
Yes.
Okay. First is for Mona Yassin. This is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2024. Is there somebody on council who'd like to make this appointment?
Mayor Taylor,
I think that was Mrs. Schmidt.
resolve to appoint Mona Yassin to the Arts Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2024, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? If no discussion, can we please have a roll call vote, Ms. Riska?
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
and Mrs. Yarko.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next is member Stacy Zarko seeking reappointment to the Arts Commission. This is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2024. Council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Schmidt,
resolve to appoint Stacy Ziarko to the Arts Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2024, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
Mr. Mayor,
on that,
Yeah,
best interest of the city to appoint.
okay. Mr. Koszybski, there was a little interference when the two of you were speaking.
sorry,
We
Mr.
need
Mayor,
to
I
add
need
that.
to,
Yeah, why don't you just tell us what you need here, Mr. Koszybski?
okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask that Councilwoman Schmidt amend her motion or withdraw her motion and start over. With respect to our charter provisions, Stacy Ziarko being a sibling of, or sorry, daughter of Councilwoman Ziarko, there is a requirement that there is a affirmative finding that's in the best interest of the city to appoint Stacy Ziarko to this board. So we need to have that as part of the motion as well.
So what exactly do I need to say?
My suggestion
on
would
the-
be, my suggestion would be.
So let
that-
me take
Go
it,
ahead.
Mark. If you do, you have Mrs. Schmidt? Do you have the memo open that was sent by Mrs.
I
Riska
do
earlier
not.
in the day?
I do not, and my iPad is what I'm on, so I do not.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, Ms. Schmidt, is it all right if I pass on you and have Mrs. Kosky make the motion?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Mrs.
Okay.
Kosky,
I move that it being in the best interest of the city to appoint Stacy Zarko to the Arts Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2024, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
it's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, Mrs. Kosky?
No, we're good. She's great.
Okay, any council, any further discussion? Mrs. Sarowski, any discussion? Okay, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
We may have lost Mrs. Sarowski.
Yes, I was muted and I had to come back in because my power went out. But the
Okay.
answer is yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes,
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky.
Yes.
motion carries 7-0. Next is the Beautification Commission. This is a city council appointment. There are 5 positions, 3 members seeking reappointment. Henrietta Bashevsky, Sharon Mason, and Joyce Ty, to terms ending June 30th, 2023. Is there anyone who'd like to make that motion?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Sarowski.
resolve to appoint Henry Fakashevsky, Sharon Mason, and Joyce Tye to the Beautification Committee to a term ending June 30th, 2023, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
and Mr. Radke.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. There's two openings, one to a term ending June 30th, 2022, and one to a term ending June 30th, 2024. Council, is there anyone who has an appointment to either of those terms? If not, I'll pass on those two items. Next is the Historical Commission. Cynthia Appleton is seeking reappointment to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Is there a motion, council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Konsky.
move to appoint Cynthia Appleton to this commission to a term ending June 30th, 2023, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Library Board of Trustees. Two openings, one member seeking reappointment. Christopher Frezza this is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Council, is there an appointment?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
if I have an appointment, can I do them both with Mr. Frezas or can I do both at the same time, or does Mr. Frezas have to be separate?
Absolutely, you can do both at the same time.
Okay,
And I
resolve to
encourage you
appoint,
to.
resolve to appoint Christopher Frezza and Wendy Popko to the Library Board of Trustees to a term ending June 30th, 2023, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
I just wanted to thank Wendy Popko for stepping up and volunteering for this job. I know that I used to see her at least every other day when I was petitioning outside the library. So I think she's a power user there. So she'll do very good on the board. That's all I have.
Completely agree. Council, anyone else? No further discussion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Next is the Solid Waste Commission. Solid Waste Commission has two members, two openings. One member seeking reappointment, Christine Kiesik. This is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2023. Is there anyone who'd like to make that motion?
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Schmidt.
resolve to appoint Christine Krezik to the Solid Waste Management Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2023, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Yanes,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
and Mayor Taylor.
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. There is one open position on the Solid Waste Commission. Is there anyone who has an appointment? If not, I'll pass on that item for now. Next up is the Sustainability Commission. This is a new board that was just recently formed right before the COVID-19 pandemic. And we really haven't had the opportunity to get out, promote, and recruit for this board. So we have 5 openings, and I understand there's only so far one application on file. So I'll open it up to the council, to anybody who wants to make an appointment.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Yanez.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Mark Graff to the Sustainability Committee.
Support.
Okay. We need, Mr. Yanez, we need, so we need a little bit more information than that. There are 5 positions. There are 3 different term ending dates. Do you want to appoint him to the term ending June 30th, 2023, 2022, or 2021?
To the term ending 2023.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
I have a question for the city attorney. It says here that no one met the 13-day deadline for appointment. So can we even appoint Mr. Graff at this point?
Mr. Koszybski.
I would need confirmation from Ms. Riska on whether or not he met the deadline. If not, then we would have to postpone to the next meeting.
Okay.
Ms. Riska, is that, it's pretty,
Yeah.
seems pretty clear on your memo.
Yes, Mr. Graff applied yesterday.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Mr. Yanez, would you consider withdrawing your motion?
Yes, I'll withdraw.
Okay, the Sustainability Commission has 5 openings. Nobody is qualified to be appointed just yet. Let's postpone this. I would entertain a motion to postpone this item to the July 7th, 2020 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Support.
Support. Moved and supported with no discussion. Can we please have a roll call vote, Ms. Riska?
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Koski,
Mrs. Koski, you're muted.
I'm sorry, yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
and Mr. Yanez.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next is the Youth Advisory Board. There are a number of open positions here, but there are 3 members seeking reappointment: Serena Bedaweed, Allison Haba, and Andre Konja. This is a city council appointment to a term ending June 30th, 2021. Is there anyone who'd like to make that motion?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Resolved to appoint Serena Bedaweed, Allison Haba, and Andre Konyak to the Youth Advisory Board to a term ending June 30th, 2021, subject to the appointees meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter subset 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
No.
With no discussion, all in favor, I'm sorry, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes, you're doing good work, Mike.
Thank you.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
and Mrs. Yarko.
Yes, and I have a question. We have been saying that these nominees or you have to take the oath of office within 2 weeks. Is that 2 weeks from today or 2 weeks when you send them a letter? And when will the office be open for them to actually take the oath? Because we've been doing this, but we know that they couldn't go in tomorrow and get sworn in. So I think it would be helpful to clarify that for everybody that was nominated tonight.
Ms. Riska?
Yeah, so we will be open to the public on Wednesday of next week. They will, we could extend the period at which, if they can't come in before that 14-day deadline, but that would be the prerogative of council to set that.
Mayor Taylor,
Okay. Mrs. Zarko?
is that something that we'd have to vote on, or to extend that period because the office isn't going to be open for a week?
Well, Mr. Koszubski, what happens if they don't take the oath within 2 weeks?
Then they don't get the appointment. So if you want to extend that, you'd have to do that now.
Okay, can we by motion extend all of these all at once?
Yes, I'd say you could.
Okay, let's do, why don't we take, well, let me ask this. There's 17 open positions on the Youth Advisory Board. Is there anyone who has appointments to those open positions? Okay, we're going to pass on that. I will at this point entertain a motion from a council member who would like to extend the provision on each appointment to extend it. Well, I guess we could say 4 weeks. Mrs. Zarko, is that what do you have in mind?
Well, because I guess it would be, if Mrs. Riska isn't going to be every day, if it's every other day that she's going to be there, 4 weeks would be fair, I think, for sure. I mean, I would say 3 weeks at the minimum to extend it 1 week, but depending on how the office hours are going to work until we're full staff and full hours, I would like to give the appointees as much time as they can to get there. The other thing is if they decided to like Zoom with Mrs. Riska, could they get sworn in that way?
Ms.
I
Riska?
mean, I guess there would be other options, but I just want to make sure that they're not penalized for not doing it in the suggested amount of time.
Understood. Ms. Riska, do you know if you can Zoom these oaths of office?
I do not know of any provisions that do not allow me to Zoom, but I would defer to Mr. Koszubski to confirm that. And if I could just make one more note to Councilwoman Ziarko, the clerk's office, as well as all other offices, will have people in the office every day beginning next Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? We can look into it, whether they can do a Zoom, and we can, if that's an option, we'll let them know. I would entertain a motion to extend the period of time for all appointments to boards and commissions tonight to take the oath of office by June 30th, 2020.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Mr. Koszubski, is there any technical issue with the motion as made and on the floor?
No, I think that would be sufficient, Mayor.
Okay. Any discussion, council? With no discussion, Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Ziarko,
Yes.
and Mrs. Koski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. All right, by my count, I believe we have vacancies on the Corridor Improvement Authority, the Elected Officials Compensation Commission, but that one has been dealt with, the LDFA, 2 on the Beautification Commission, none on the Library Board of Trustees, 1 for the Solid Waste Commission, 5 for the Sustainability Commission, and 17 for the Youth Advisory Board.
Mayor,
We,
Sustainability
Mr.
Commission was dealt with.
Oh, yes, you're right. Sustainability Commission was postponed to the July meeting. Question is, do we want to postpone? So how about this? I'll entertain a motion to postpone to the June 16th, 2020 City Council meeting, all of these boards and commissions that have vacancies that were not appointed tonight.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Actually, there can be no discussion. So, Ms. Riska, we
Mayor?
need a Mr. Koszybski.
Sorry again, for point of clarification, it's any of these appointments that were not made that weren't already rescheduled, correct?
Correct. So this motion is not covering the Sustainability Commission or the Elected Officials Compensation Commission.
Thank you.
This is a non-debatable motion. Ms. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Sarowski, I'm sorry, Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko,
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky,
Yes.
and Mr. Radke.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 7-0, and we will move on from that item on our agenda tonight and move on to communications from citizens. And losing my voice, that, I joke, but that's a tough one even in an in-person meeting. So thank you for all of that work, Mrs. Riska. Next item on our agenda tonight is communications from citizens. As we noted at the beginning of the meeting, communications from citizens will be taken via teleconference tonight. All members of the public will continue to be muted until they are called upon. At this time, I'm just going to take a look and see. Looks like we do have at least 2 members of the public that are remaining on the call. So those remaining on the phone that wish to participate in communications from citizens, you'll be recognized in turn and ask whether you have any comment at that time. If you wish to participate in this portion of the meeting, please press *9 on your telephone right now, which will notify me that your hand is raised and that you desire to speak. When prompted, please state your name and I will allow you to address the City Council. And please be advised that there could be delays because of the number of calls received. Given the number of calls right now, which is 2, and both have their hands up, I propose that the public be afforded 4 minutes to address each city council member under communications from citizens. So as I said, we've got 2 callers on the line. I'm going to go to caller with the last 4 digits, 5922. I'm going to unmute you, 313 caller with the last 4, 5922. Please state your name. You have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine LaChance, and I'm a resident of Sterling Heights.
Hi, ma'am. Go ahead with your comments.
Okay, sorry. I'm speaking to support the proclamation of declaring the first Friday in June as Gun Violence Awareness Day in Sterling Heights. I just want to say thank you for your continued support of this issue. It's very personal to me. I lost my brilliant cousin, Michelle, 8 years ago this July, and your support makes me so proud to be a citizen of Sterling Heights. And I just want to thank all of you for your support of it.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and we appreciate you being on the call with us tonight and the courage to speak on this. I know that this was an item that over the past has been something that's been something very impactful to the members on the City Council here. So we appreciate you being here and speaking. So thank you very much. I'm going to put you on mute now. Thank you. And then to the caller with the last 4 digits ending in 1285, I'm going to unmute you. You have 4 minutes. The floor is yours. Please announce yourself, your name. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pamela Eidline. You met me last year when I brought you the proclamation for National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And I appreciated so much that you supported us last year and continue with that support this year. You are this year joining Utica, Clinton Township, Warren, New Baltimore, Macomb County, and Centerline, who are also making the proclamation. So I'm glad that you are part of our countywide support of this. And I also thank you for again lighting up the halo, because that's going to be noticeable to everyone on M59. Thank you again for everything. That's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your comments tonight. And again, as I said, this was something that I know, speaking with other council members, was something very memorable. And it's the least that we can do. And our hearts go out to all the victims of gun violence. So with that, I will make one more scroll through. And it looks like we have everybody who has wanted to speak has had the opportunity to speak. So I'll close that portion and move on to reports from city administration. Mr. Vanderpool, any items for tonight?
Mayor, nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Mr. Koszybski, anything?
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Koszybski. Council, I'll move on to reports from city council, new business reports. Anyone like to go first?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yanis.
So, Mr. Mayor, I want to take this opportunity to offer a sincere apology to my colleagues who felt that I disparaged them. That was certainly not my intent. I wasn't prepared to let my emotions get away with that issue. I won't delve into that any deeper, other than I offer a sincere apology. I know that Mrs. Yarko, Mrs. Schmidt have served this council well for many years. They've served the democratic process well for many years. They've done a great job for the citizens of Sterling Heights. And so I apologize for my my passion on the issue. And I'll just let it go at that. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Yanis. Council, anyone else? Going once, going twice? Okay, well, I just want to, again, I see a number of our directors are still on the call. Again, thank you for your work in preparing our budget. Your efforts are really greatly appreciated in everything you've done to continue providing services to the city. Probably some of you are now busier more than ever and dealing with things that none of us thought we'd ever deal with. But I thank you for all your hard work on behalf of our residents and the city council. So with that said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mike, I have one question. I'm sorry.
Mr. Radke and Mrs. Zarko, you have the mute button on, or else he would have been. So Radke.
Oh, you knew. It's coming.
Do we need to give city administration guidance on the preparation of the ballot questions we previously discussed today?
So I don't believe we do. Mr. Koszybski, I believe, is able to. I think the biggest issue that we have is the time constraints. I spoke with Mr. Koszybski this afternoon, and based on the options that we gave him at the last city council meeting, gave the administration and legal believe that they have enough direction to get preliminary discussions going with the Attorney General's office so that we're not behind the eight ball here. Is that a fair is that a fair characterization, Mr. Koszybski? You want to add anything to that?
Based on the comments that we received at the last meeting, we have enough direction to move forward on a 4-year term ballot language for the Attorney General to consider, as well as whether it's going to be a percentage or a flat fee number, or not flat fee, flat number for a signature reduction for nominating petitions. We can at least start those discussions with the AG and bring you something at the next meeting.
So it will be on the agenda for the next meeting, or do we have to bring it up from our reports next meeting?
My understanding is we were directed to bring something back for the 16th.
Okay, wonderful. That's all. I just wanted to make sure. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. So we'll take one more shot at it. And before we do, I just want to say to all of our residents out there, we appreciate all your continued efforts and doing what you can to stay safe, and bear with us as we go through what is turning out to be a very difficult summer. But I'm proud of all of our residents and what we've done so far. And I can tell you, all of these people on the call, all of our directors, our police chief, our fire chief, and every one of us is doing everything we can to keep our public safe. And so I'll leave it at that and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, and I'm surprised you didn't hear me at your house from here.
The air conditioning kicked on just at the right time, or else maybe been moved and supported. Ms. Riska, can we have one final roll call vote for this meeting?
Yes. Mrs. Sarowski,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Yanez,
Yes, very much so.
Mrs. Ziarko,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Mrs. Koski,
Yes.
Mr. Radke,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn carries 7-0. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this meeting. Thank you, directors, city council, city administration, and city attorney. We are adjourned.
Mike, the next meeting, are you back at City Hall?
Well, we're adjourned. That'll be updated between now and then.